Today we have a wonderful artist joining us. She is a singer, songwriter, published writer, poet, actress, model, dancer, a mom, a humanitarian, rights activist. She's also a handful. She's a re-emerging artist who today is here to explain her story, and she's been dormant over a decade. Welcome, Megan Bayra.
Thanks for the
Hi,
lovely
Megan.
introduction, Erica. I'll never forget because I met you when I was the brokest and the fattest I've ever been in my life. This is when I met you, and you didn't care. You loved me just as I was.
And I still do, actually. Yes. My wonderful friend. Megan is very fun. She's a handful. She really is. She's a wonderful mom. She's a wonderful friend. You just gotta love her. So tell us more about where you're originally from.
I am originally from the state of Maine. Most people don't seem to know where that is. It's not Massachusetts. It is next to Canada. Um, and I never cared for it. I never fit in. Um, it's freezing cold 8 months out of the year,
Okay.
and people are very. A lot of people are very closed-minded, um, and it's kind of like a bubble, a safe bubble that everybody likes to stay in.
Mhm.
So there's not a lot of risk, so nothing ever changes and everything just stays the same. And
Yeah.
people are born there and they die there and they have kids and they repeat the cycle. And
Mhm.
um, way too mundane for me,
Okay. Sounds kind of
way
boring.
too boring for me.
Yes.
So yeah, I decided that I always knew I wanted to move to LA. So the first time I did that, I was 17, and I came out for college here, and it's been home for me ever since.
Oh yeah.
That's
okay. So you love it now.
Oh yeah, California will always be home for me.
Oh, wonderful. So tell us, how long have you been writing and performing for?
Let's see. I started performing when I was 2, actually,
Okay.
and I did ballet. That was my first love and my first career.
Okay.
I did that for over a decade.
Oh, wonderful.
I was a ballerina. I did modern hip hop, choreography, um, and yeah, that was absolutely. It'll always be something uh, very close to my heart. I've gotten away from it, and now I'm finally getting back into it,
Okay.
and starting to train again.
Okay. I really
Um,
enjoy that. Yeah.
and it feels really good.
Okay. So tell us, who are the artists or musicians who have really impacted you the most in life?
I would say lyricists, definitely Stephen Jenkins from Third Eye Blind. Um, he's one of my favorite lyricists, if not number one. Um, Also, Ani DeFranco, Anthony Kiedis. Other writers that have influenced me are Shakespeare, Sylvia Plath, um, Elliott Smith.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, those are people that have their words have spoken to me the greatest.
So with that, can you tell us about your favorite genre of music? What would you say is your favorite genre?
I'd have to say blues. Um, I've sang everything, but that's really where my heart is.
And why do you like blues? What about it does? What does it do for you?
Honestly, people think that singing brings so much joy, but that's not necessarily my experience. Um, I like blues the most because it's more about it makes you feel less dead. So it's not necessarily about making me feel joyful. It makes me feel less dead.
Okay.
So, and I think that the blues is a very unique category in that way.
Okay. Kind of taps into the soul. What would you say?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I understand that you have, coming this July, two singles that are coming out. You actually have them in music videos produced for them. Can you tell us about your songs and maybe where the people can find them or hear about them?
Yeah. I have two music videos coming out, hopefully in July, and two singles. And I actually wrote them a decade ago. And everything in my career stopped when I had kids.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so now I'm just able to get back to myself, um, and refocus on my career after raising a family. The first video, the first song I wrote is a song called "Could I Be," and it was off my album that I wrote 10 years ago. I think it was 2015, 2014. My album was called October. That whole album was really about, well, it was inspired from a relationship in my 20s. Um, and a lot of the content had to do with being unmet, being unrequited, um, being, twin flames that never really uh, line up at the right time,
Mhm.
keep missing each other. And so there's a lot of grief in that, and turmoil. So Could I Be was a third track on the album. And I actually wrote it. It started off as a poem, which my writing style is, normally I write poems and then I have to structure them into songs. Um, and it was about feeling not good enough, and like, if I could just be that right person, if I could be that right girl, then that person would choose me.
Right.
Then that person would claim me. Then somehow this relationship, it would work.
Right.
Right? And being unwilling to let go of that obsession of, trying to be that right person, trying to be that perfect person so that I would be chosen and loved. I think a lot of people really can relate to that.
Absolutely.
If I'm smarter, if I'm prettier, if I have more money, if I'm more successful, if I'm this, if I'm, whatever the story it is. And because I clung to that story so hard, and that was based out of a belief that intrinsically I wasn't somehow enough to begin with.
Right.
Which is a lie. So, but, I lived out of that belief system in my 20s. And so, Could I Be is really expressing that grief of never feeling like you're enough to be chosen, and that frustration of just trying to make something work and trying to get that person to see your worth, trying to get that acceptance and be chosen.
Mm-hmm.
And then realizing at the end of it that whether someone accepts you or rejects you actually has nothing to do with you.
Absolutely.
That's about them, and their desires and their preferences. And whether someone sees my value or not is not a reflection of my self-worth.
Absolutely.
And realizing, if I could go back to talk to myself in my, my 20s, I don't think I would have listened. But, if I could have opened my ears, I would have said that the only important thing is that I choose myself. I have to choose myself. And I got to a point where, I don't chase that validation or approval in other people or in relationships, because I validate myself. Doing the music video for the song that I wrote 10 years ago when I was in this grief and in this different space, it's now really interesting being able to reflect on that, because I'm definitely no longer in the place I was when I wrote that song.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. You just mentioned that you are a poet. You actually write the poetry. You start off that before you do your song. You
Yeah.
put it into a song. Well, I understand you have a second edition of your poetry book that's coming out in 2025. Do you want to tell us more about that first?
Yeah. Then I can touch on I have another single coming out as well. Okay. Another music video coming out as well. Okay. Actually, the book and that video kind of really coincide. So I wrote a book in 2020 called Unrequited. And I had my poetry published before in other works, but this was the first book that I wrote and self-published. And there were pieces that I couldn't find at the time, old pieces I wanted to add in, and now there's new pieces I want to put in. I wanted to creatively change the artwork, the cover work around and stuff. So I'm putting out the second edition. It's going to be available sometime in 2025. I'm not sure what month yet, but it's going to be self-published through Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah, it's called Unrequited, and it is a collection of all of my poetry from the last 20 years of surviving life and of not surviving life, and being able to recover from certain things and then not being able to recover from other things and living with that. So a lot of the themes, speak to, well, again, the title is Unrequited. So it's about being unmet. The energy and the love you put out is not reciprocated on the same level. The things and the people that you make a priority don't make you a priority. Right. There's it's like a specific kind of pain and anguish that comes with that when you've attached that that longing to your identity.
Right.
Of being unrequited. One of the poems that I wrote was my other single that's coming out. Started off as a poem, and I turned it into a ballad. That is like Could I Be is very, very loud and rock and pop, and there's a lot of angst. But my other single that I'm talking about, the ballad I'm putting out, is called January, and it's totally different energy. It's very very melancholy, very cinematic. I wrote this poem I think nine years ago. And it's telling a story about how, for me, meeting the love of my life in my early 20s in New England. And it was very interesting because it coincided. I'm born in January. I know you are to us, yes, Aquariuses, right? January, yes. And so I'm born in January, and I also met this individual in the wintertime. So it was about that experience of him and how that completely changed my life irrevocably.
And would you care to elaborate on that?
Ooh, how much time do you have?
We have a little bit of time right now.
We got
just a little bit of time. Yeah, tell us.
I feel like for a lot of us, our hearts don't always survive everything, and we just have to learn how to cope with the scar tissue we have, because we have no other choices. So when people don't ultimately claim us and choose us, we're left with really two options. There's stay and torture yourself,
Mhm.
or you have to walk away and choose yourself.
Right. So it's a self healing process.
And there's like a tearing,
Yeah.
a pulling apart of your soul that happens, um, because that person is a part of you.
Yes.
So it's like, in order to, you can't cut them out and just leave with yourself, because they're like part of your DNA.
Yes.
They're part of who you become as a person and an artist, down to like a cellular level,
Absolutely.
you know?
Understand.
And for me, that's how much this individual affected me.
So on that note,
Yeah.
Miss Megan, can you tell us? Maybe the audience wants to know. People want to know. What is your relationship status currently?
Oh, currently I am in a very content, peaceful relationship with myself.
Okay.
Um, and
How does that feel for you now?
it's so serene.
Okay.
Like, you know, I guess it's perspective. Somebody can look at it as loneliness, and somebody can look at it as solace. And that's what shifted for me.
Okay.
Like, I like being around myself. I enjoy my own energy.
Yes.
So to be in my life, you better at least match my energy, you know, because I'm fine eating alone.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
So
I
did
don't
you ever
I don't
get?
mind eating alone. That's fine. I'm good being by
You're
myself.
good.
I enjoy my own company.
Mm.
I don't need, you know, I don't need someone else all the time there.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Right.
it's not.
So would you ever get married?
Would I ever get married?
You thought about marriage?
I mean, I don't know what the rest of my life is going to hold. I mean, only the creator knows that. But
Right.
asking me this at this point in my life, my answer would be there's only one person that I would consider marrying, because I'm not a traditional gal. And if you know me, you know that. Um, the one man I would consider marrying is a man. His name is Mohammed Tahir,
Wow.
and he is a world-renowned nerve surgeon. He has an unmatched heart.
What makes him more special to you? What do you feel makes him special?
He is, without a doubt, I think, the example of just humbleness, and um, exemplifies compassion and empathy for the human race. And I say this because, and I want to specify that I learned about his story online, that he was a very, very, very successful surgeon, uh, in every way possible. But he saw the humanitarian suffering of the children and the people in Palestine. And he was living this very privileged, comfortable life.
Mm-hmm.
And he couldn't handle that without doing something.
Right.
And so he risked his life and stopped his whole, everything.
Mm-hmm.
And did 3 or 4 missions in Gaza, operating on thousands, probably several thousand.
So there's a connection there. I can see the connection.
Children,
yeah. Yeah. Nice.
on limbs, and every kind of, surgical procedure for every injury you can think of, right?
Right.
And while bombs are dropping and the hospital is shaking,
Wow.
right? And his bravery is unmatched. His heart is unmatched. The capacity to which a human being can sacrifice, that is what he exemplifies.
Okay.
And I think there's nothing more commendable. There's nothing more attractive than that.
Right.
Like, there's just not.
Okay. Yeah, kind of what you feel. That's who you are. So this person, he could match what you stand for.
Absolutely. He's so kind, and he's beautiful. Not only on the outside, he's very beautiful, but internally, he's selfless. That's what it is. He's completely selfless.
Okay.
And self-sacrificing for humanity and for children's rights.
So with that said, all of the wonderful things that this person is doing and the things that you're doing in your life, how would you quantify success?
Ooh, how would I quantify success? That I would have had a very different answer for you in my 20s. That definition has changed for me. So is the music industry, so is the world and everything, in my perspective. So, in my 20s, I would have said the height of success would have been to get a major record deal, through, I don't know, Columbia or Warner Brothers, and, to have that, the regular avenue for commercial and financial success. Yeah, and a lot of it, of course, is, making a lot of money and, touring the world, selling, thousands and thousands of albums. And, that was really what I was chasing. And that really changed for me. My priorities and my idea of success now, how I quantify that is how much I am able to lessen someone's suffering. How much am I able to influence someone's life to be able to lessen their suffering? It's very like the old idea that I had was still very egoic, and the world, quite frankly, I think is so much worse in so many ways. And there's so much more pain on such a mind-blowing scale that I don't think at the end of my life that the creator is going to say, oh yeah, I see, you made millions of dollars in the industry, and you stepped over everyone to get to the top, and you sold thousands of records and played sold out shows, and everyone loves you so much. Oh, my child, I'm so proud of you. Well, I don't care. That's the thing, is I don't give a shit about people's, if they like my music, if they don't, if they approve of it, if they don't, that's not why I do it. What's most important to me, I think, at the end of our lives is, I think ultimately it's going to come down to this. Were you kind or were you cruel? Were you helpful or were you hurtful? Not, how many millions did you make?
Yeah.
How many concerts did you sell out? How many albums did you sell? So, for me, I think that's a great side effect.
Right.
You know what I mean? Using whatever platform I have to, I don't know, help lessen the suffering or the pain in this world, whether it's through, writing poetry that people can relate to, or hearing a song that people can connect with, or being a voice for people that don't have one.
So Megan, most people today know you as a sober person. Can you tell us how long you've been sober, and how has that journey looked like for you?
I've been sober 16 years now, and that journey has not been straight. That journey has been very circular, and very, very imperfect. And I'm very sincerely grateful every day that I get to be here and experience living life, because I was alive for a long time, but I wasn't living. and to be alive and living at the same time is a gift.
Right. So we know that in addiction, sometimes things are lost. Tell me about, if at all, what was lost in your addiction?
I mean, um, what was lost? I lost myself. That was the biggest thing that I lost. I lost my self-respect. I lost my dignity. I lost my physical health. I lost my mental health. I lost a lot of career and educational opportunities that I had. I never liked school, but I was very good at it, and I had a lot of huge academic opportunities that I started to pursue. And what happens is that at some point there's some line that you cross in the sand, and that feeling that you're chasing, that you become addicted to, that takes priority over everything else in your life. And you are being driven by a force that you no longer have control over. It's controlling you. And so while I wanted to, get a degree, a writing degree, I wanted to get my creative writing degree and master's in poetry and all of the stuff. The disease of addiction decided that alcoholism was more important and that everything else would wait.
So with that, knowing you now, what does that feel, or what does that look like for you now? Because you look like you've come back stronger and better than ever. Tell us about, what is your perception or your perspective now that you are clean and sober?
Mental health is number one. So in long-term recovery, what I've learned, and I've learned it the hard way, is that at some point, physical sobriety was not enough for me. Like when I met you, I was physically sober, but like emotionally, I was not. And I was, I was suffering still a lot in sobriety, and so for me, I had to learn how to get emotional sobriety. That's the thing that's not talked about enough. It's all about, just detox and just go to a rehab and get physically sober. And it's like, you have to change your character. You have to change nearly everything.
Yeah, the mentality has to change.
You have to surrender. And it's layers of just when you think you can't surrender anymore, just when you think you can't hit another rock bottom. I've hit so many emotional rock bottoms in recovery. So what's different now is that I know I have to prioritize my mental health over anything else.
Thank you for sharing that. That's very powerful, what you said. So with that, what would you say was the hardest substance that you had to put down? What substance was the hardest for you?
People.
Oh. Why do you say that?
Because it's very tricky and it's very seductive because, unlike alcohol or narcotics, you can put that down and you can live without that. You don't ever have to do that again. But we are all wired for human connection,
right,
down to our DNA. And without connecting, having human contact, just connecting with people, we're not wired to survive. You know what I mean? Like we survived through community, you know what I mean? Through connection, not through, individualism, right? I think that's a lot of what's wrong with society today. But, so it's something so primal, to want to be loved and want to give love. And so without a doubt, love is the hardest drug I've ever done.
Right. So what are some of the things that have helped you most in your recovery?
Getting honest with myself and finding someone else that could be a sounding board for me to get honest with, because for me, my head likes to tell me lots of lies, uh, lots of core beliefs that were instilled in me at a young age that were not true,
Okay.
that I, that became a part of me. And so I need help differentiating the truth from the lies, because my mind tells me a bunch of crap about myself, and so I can't always trust my mind. So to have someone else that can be a sounding board that is not, is not going to sugarcoat it for you.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to tell you, they're going to tell you like it is.
Right.
So that you can continue to grow. So if I can't take that constructive criticism from someone and that feedback, then I'm probably going to stay stuck. Yeah. Right? Because self can't reveal self.
That's true.
My broken mind can't fix my mind. Right. And the more I'm trying to fix my mind with my broken mind, yes. It's just, you know what I mean? It's just like I need something outside of myself, like objectively, you know what I mean? So that the biggest thing is being of service.
Okay.
I would say number one for me, that's the biggest thing that has kept me sober, is being of service to other people who are in active addiction or just suffering, whether that looks like they don't have enough food, they're cold, they're hungry, they're homeless, whatever, they someone has just died, whatever that suffering looks like, to be able to be of service. And also the last thing, maintaining some connection with a power greater than myself. Yes. What I choose to call my creator. Yes. And continuing to turn my will and my life over to that higher power, because when Megan's running the show, I'm really good at fucking up my life. I'm really good at, going back into toxic relationships and, having distorted perceptions of myself. And so I what I've learned is that my creator, their plan for me is so much better than Megan's plan.
Right. So yeah. What I wanted to talk to you about, today, many people are not aware of what narcissistic behavior or characteristics look like. There's many different ideologies of it. My understanding is that psychologists are just now really getting a hold of understanding narcissistic abuse. In your experience, first of all, may I ask you, have you ever experienced narcissistic abuse?
Definitely. Yeah.
In your experience, I know this could be hard. In your experience, would you say it's harder to recover from the physical or the verbal abuse part of what it is?
For me, as someone who is a domestic abuse survivor many times over, I think narcissistic abuse is the hardest to recover from. I think it's, again, everyone's experience is different. I think it's worse than physical abuse or just emotional abuse. I'd rather be punched in the face than be mind fucked. Okay. Because it's been, clinically, medically proven that psychological and narcissistic abuse, actually, it takes way longer for the brain to heal and recover from than physical abuse. Yeah. On so many levels, because it literally rewires your brain chemistry.
It does. It absolutely
like rewires the nerves in your brain. And then people go, well, why are they still with him? Why haven't they left them yet? We're asking the wrong questions.
Right. Because in narcissistic abuse, what I understand is that there's the love bombing, right? And then there is this gaslighting of making you believe something that isn't really there. Then you actually have the flying monkeys, the triangulation.
Mm-hmm.
You have the hoovering, and then you have the discard. So there's so many different layers of narcissistic abuse. And many people, they just don't really understand that. So experience that and go through that, it's something.
And it's a loop. Like all those things that you said, that's a cycle. That's a loop.
Right.
And so when you're trying to get out of that, you're trying to break out in between all those stages that they're putting you. It's like a merry-go-round.
It is, absolutely.
And the best thing that I've realized to try and get away from narcissistic abuse and begin to heal, don't engage in the cycle. Don't take the bait. Because that's the goal, is to get you hooked back on the merry-go-round. That's what they want. They want to go around and around and around. Are they going to get you with guilt? How about shame? How about remorse? How about pity? How about I love you? How about I won't do it again? Whatever it is, they want to get you back on that rat wheel. And then you're doing the dance all over again. Right? And so it's like, for me, it's no contact. For me, it's do not engage.
Yeah.
You don't need to say hello. You don't need to say Merry Christmas. Don't open the fucking door. Leave it closed.
So with that, many people might not recognize the signs. What are some of the red flags that you could share with us that maybe you know about or experienced or can understand?
A narcissist will, again, the love bombing happens at first to make you feel like soulmates. Even if it's actually not, like there's a lot of narcissistic abuse that even I've experienced that wasn't romantic, that was familial. Red flags for that are when you feel that someone's starting to invalidate your reality, saying things like, I never said that.
And they did.
Right.
Yeah.
That didn't happen.
Right.
Why are you making things up?
The gaslighting.
Or it wasn't that bad. You're being over dramatic. You're being too emotional. You just need to stop being so emotional. That's the problem.
The dismissive stage. Yeah.
Dismissive. Making you think that you are the problem. Every time you try and say, but my feelings matter. They're like, no, they don't. Here's a red flag. This is a big one. This was used on me. If you bring someone your feelings and say, hey, when you did A, B, and C, it really hurt my feelings. Can you see how that would be hurtful? And can you please not do that again? And they say, I didn't hurt you. You hurt yourself.
Yeah. It's
you're
hard.
You're already damaged.
Yeah.
I'm not damaging you. You were damaged when you met me. You're hurting yourself.
Wow. It's like the
I'm not hurting you. I take care of you. Right? They'll use anything to put that back on the victim to get the attention off of themselves. So narcissists have to weave a spell, and they have to keep an image. Yeah. Their image is numero uno that they have to uphold to everyone.
So with that, how would you say one would break away from that?
There's no right or wrong way. I can't tell anyone how to survive. If you can run. If you have to crawl, most times it looks like going back several times. Yes. That's normally 9 times out of 10, you don't get away the first time. It's not how it happens. They suck you back into that cycle several times, and it gets worse every single, just like addiction. Right. You can be sober for 6 months, you can be sober for a year, but if you go back, you're going back to where you left off, and even further, right?
Mm-hmm.
That progression is even further now. So everyone's rock bottom looks different.
Mm-hmm.
But if someone starts to make you feel like you're always, that, you're crazy,
Mm-hmm.
your reality isn't valid, your feelings aren't valid,
Right.
Leave.
Yeah.
Yeah, leave.
So with this said, the children, what would your advice be to if there was a child and they grew up in a maybe they're finding out now that they grew up in a domestic situation where there was narcissistic abuse? What would be your advice to them today?
To me, that's like the worst. That's the hardest situation, right? Because when we're children, the power dynamic is not equal at all. It's completely different.
Yeah.
And children are powerless, they're helpless. And when you grow up with narcissistic parents, you're a hostage.
Mm-hmm.
You're a hostage.
Yeah.
And when you learn that that you are totally dependent and reliant on someone who's abusive to you,
Mm-hmm.
that's almost impossible to get away from, because how do you get your needs met?
Right.
How are you going to eat? How are you going to get clothes? How are you going to get to school?
Yeah.
Where are you going to get money? How are you going to keep a roof over your head? When a parent, controls all of those things. And for a narcissist, it's all about control.
Yeah.
Staying in control at all costs, maintaining their image at all costs. Believe children.
Yeah.
It's really sad that there's so much, so much doubt that like somehow their truth is not as believable as an adult's.
Yeah.
It's also really hard for a child to articulate, because you can say, well, I don't see any bruises on the child, because they're in your mind.
Right.
They're in your heart.
Yeah.
Your heart is bruised. Your brain is bruised. How do you even articulate that as a child?
Right.
And so again, I don't think there's I'll never tell, there's no right or wrong way on how to survive. Just survive. When you get old enough to a point where you have an opportunity to exit,
Mm-hmm.
take the exit. It's a game of having to please the narcissist, walk on eggshells, be who they want you to be. There's this triangular dynamic of being the hero, being the victim, or the persecutor, I believe it is. And the narcissist always has to be the hero. They always have to be the hero.
Yeah.
They've got to have a scapegoat.
Yep.
They can't, there's got to be a villain,
Mm-hmm.
And so,
There's usually like a golden child and a scapegoat.
right, exactly.
And those power dynamics, I understand, can change at any time. So
right.
one child could be the scapegoat, the other becomes a golden child, and that's part of the triangulation dynamics.
But I think, if you're a kid, I think it's our jobs as adults to really take what kids say more seriously.
Yeah.
And stop doubting them.
So when a parent says to you, you'll understand when you're older, what do you understand now that you didn't understand as a child?
Ooh, that is a great question. Now that I am the same age that my parents were when they had me, my answer would be, I understand that there are no more excuses for you. There are no more excuses for your behavior and your problems. That children will grow up to be your equal. And the power dynamic will change. And they will grow up to see you as an adult, as just a human being. And it's really simple. They're going to grow up to either see you as a good person or a bad person in a lot of ways. And you're not going to fool them. what do I know now that I didn't know when I was younger? The only thing is that I'm able to better articulate what I already knew. I would never in a million years, being the same age as they were when they had me, I would never be friends with them.
So you've come to some terms of
on an adult level, like, I would never entertain that energy, that abusiveness, that anger, that narcissistic personality. Like, I don't want to be associated with losers.
That's understandable.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't associate myself with losers.
Right.
So it's just when we're, a kid, it's like no one believes us, or somehow we're less credible. Our opinions are less credible.
Right. That's true.
Kids know if you're a safe person or unsafe person.
I agree. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I've always known. The difference is that now that I'm in my 30s, I all of a sudden have more societal credibility for people to believe me, which is wrong. Children know.
They know.
You know what I mean? So to all the parents out there that are controlling and narcissistic, just know that your child will grow up at some point and they will see you as an equal. They will see you as an adult. And that if you mistreat them, you are not entitled to a relationship with them. They do not owe you a relationship. They do not owe you respect. They do not owe you their time. That is something that has to be earned. And karma is very real.
So when talking about recovery, Megan, would you say that forgiveness is necessary or required for healing or moving on?
Contrary to popular opinion and this almost like societal stigma, I think that that belief can actually be harmful. That we have to forgive someone in order to find closure, to heal ourselves and move on. I don't agree with that at all. I believe that simply there are some things that are unforgivable. And what matters is that you as an individual can find acceptance. That it happened, that you can't change it, and it is what it is. If you can find acceptance around that, then you can create your own healing. And, going back in and opening the door to the lion's den to say, hey, I just want to let you know that I forgive you for biting me.
Yeah.
And you're going to get bitten again if you open the door. Which is the irony of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
That door, is shut for a reason. So to have to go back really in the idea that we have to risk our mental health and martyr ourselves emotionally so that, we can forgive and move on for that relationship. That's not required. I don't lose sleep. I don't. I've found acceptance in my own way because sometimes, people are so addicted to wanting closure. I got to get that closure. I got to have that last conversation. I got to, whatever it is. And sometimes that keeps the door open.
Absolutely.
And that keeps the cycle going.
Mm-hmm.
And that keeps the abuse going. And so you can create your own closure. Yeah. Sometimes, their neglect is your closure. Yeah. Their disrespect is your closure. You don't, and that's what I've learned. Always, want to go back and want to fix it. I want to create this closure, this ending. And sometimes it just doesn't happen. And you have to save yourself. Yeah. And I think there's this societal guilt of wanting to prioritize self-preservation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't have guilt about that. As I said, I don't lose sleep at night. I prioritize myself, and my mental health. And, I have found healing and closure in many ways, without having to forgive someone, because, again, I believe that, one, some things are simply unforgivable.
Yeah.
And two, that, and this is also really important, to touch on, is that people can change. It is possible.
Mm-hmm.
People can change. They can go to therapy. They can get professional help. They can get sober. They can, whatever, become a yogi, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can happen. People can really change and not continue to go around and harm other people. But all because they change doesn't mean that they are entitled to a second or third chance with you. And that's the thing I've heard from so many people. Yeah, but I got to give them another chance because, look, they've really changed. And maybe they have changed. Maybe they've stopped hurting everyone around them, which is great. But I still don't owe that person a second chance. I still don't owe that person access to me. Access to me is a privilege. It is not given. Access to me, my energy, and my time, that is earned.
I just think, to add to what you were saying, I think that what you're saying too is there with the narcissistic abuse, there are many people that don't quite understand the dynamics of it. And sometimes if you keep the door open to someone who has a pattern of abuse, and a lot of the times, even therapists, it has been clinically known that therapists, they understand the limitations with a narcissistic abuser, because the trauma that these people have experienced is so deep. But a lot of it comes from a person who doesn't want to sometimes admit to themselves that they themselves have been narcissistically abused. So if a person can't admit to themselves most of the time that they are hurt, or there's shame, or there's guilt, this person doesn't know how to come and really interact with you with feelings of empathy, feelings of sympathy. So I think to add to what you're saying is, it's important for you to close that door, find self-preservation, find solstice in what you want, and not open the door so much to look for someone who does that to you.
Right. And the other thing is that, like, you can't make someone see yourself. I can say, Ericka, you have a blue hat on. You go, I don't have a blue hat on. What are you talking about? No, really, you have a blue hat on. No, I don't. Yeah. And you can tell that person 1,000 times, and 100 people can tell you that. And until you're ready to look at yourself, you can't help someone that doesn't think they're dysfunctional or abusive. They're like, no, I'm not abusive. Like, or no, I never hurt you. I'm like, no, you don't get to decide if you hurt me or not.
Right.
You don't get to decide for me whether you hurt my feelings or not.
Right.
And so, yeah, you can't help someone that's not willing to admit to themselves that they're harmful. And I also learned, lastly, that it's not my job. It's not my job to make them get it.
Absolutely.
And it's really easy to get hooked back into that of, like, if I can just make them see themselves, if I can just make them get it, and man, I just don't have the energy. It's not my job.
And it doesn't go anywhere.
It doesn't go anywhere. And as you said, there are clinical professionals who know that there are limitations, who know that if someone is sociopathic, especially a sociopathic narcissist, there is only so much a therapist can do.
That's right.
Sometimes and people don't talk about this enough, sometimes the only way to find closure or remedy something is to permanently stay away. Mm-hmm. Because unfortunately, some people I believe, are incapable of change.
That's why it is called a
Personality
personality
disorder.
because it's the personality. No amount of medication, uh, therapy, you can talk to these individuals, but the personality is what needs to be recognized. And until a person can do that, there won't be any change. I understand that very clearly.
Yeah.
With that, tell us something from a lighter note. Tell us something that you're really bad at.
Okay, I'm really bad at cooking.
Really?
I'm Sicilian and I burn everything.
Oh, Megan.
Just about. I'm really bad at cooking. I'm really bad at math.
That's me too. So I'm with you on that. Me and math, we do not get along.
No.
Absolutely not. So I do understand that one. I agree with you. Well, then tell me something that you most hate. Things that you really hate to do. Something you hate to do.
Dishes.
Yeah, most people I'd say.
Misogyny.
Mm.
Racism.
Mm.
Dishes.
So when it comes to that, what would you choose, love or loyalty first? Which one would you pick? What do you think is most important to you? Would you say love or loyalty?
Fuck love.
And why do you say that?
Because sometimes love is not enough. No matter how much you want it to be.
Yeah.
No matter how much you put all your eggs in that basket and invest and you want it to be this way, you want it to work. Sometimes, even if there is that love, sometimes it's just not enough. And loyalty, if it's true, if it's real, in my opinion, can be enough.
Right. So tell me, what brings you joy?
What brings me joy? Surviving long enough to prove the people wrong that said I was going to fail and that I would never be anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, proving them wrong. People that wanted to see me fail.
Right.
And that told me that I would never amount to anything. And justice. That's the thing that brings me the most joy.
So tell us, what was the most important lessons that you've learned in life?
Number one, not to abandon myself for anyone, any career opportunity, but really for any relationship. I'm a recovering self-abandoner. Okay. Long-term recovery. It's to never, to always choose myself and never choose someone else over me.
Have you ever encountered people who have doubted your musical vision or your artistry?
Yes, I have. That only affects you to the extent that you allow that person, how much power you give that person, right, to affect you. Mm-hmm. So I can know that, and at times I've known that intellectually, but to know that in your heart is different.
And how did you deal with that?
There was one instance which really, really shook me to my core. And someone that was very close to me for over a decade that literally saved my life, okay? Literally saved my life on multiple occasions. I don't think I would have gotten clean and sober if it wasn't for them. And yeah, it was really, I don't think I wouldn't be here. Let's put it that way. And so I had a certain vulnerability with this person, right? And a closeness. So when I put out my album 10 years ago, when I put the October out, I was so proud of it. And of course I wanted to share it with the people that I was closest with first. You know what I mean? Like, look at what I did, And I remember I sent them a copy. I was all excited. And I didn't get a phone call back. I didn't get a text back. I didn't get an acknowledgement back.
And what were your thoughts at that time?
So a week went by, and I was like, okay, this doesn't feel good. And then another week went by, and then, I called them, and I was like, you know, and at that point it had been like a month, okay, around there. I was like, did you get my album, you know? And they were like, yeah, I got it. And I was like, well, did you listen to it? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, yeah. And I was like, well, you never called me, and like, you know, I invested so much in this, and you're one of the first people I sent it to. And they said to me, you know, I just didn't really feel it, basically is what they said. You know, I just didn't really think it was your full potential. I just didn't really, you know, basically I didn't really connect with it, is what they said to me. And I don't get to choose how my art affects someone or it doesn't.
Right.
Right? That's about you as an individual and your life experience and what speaks to you and what doesn't. All the work and songwriting, you know, I wrote like 80% of it, all the lyrics on there. You know what I mean?
Right.
To have someone that was that close to me, that I was that vulnerable with, that, you know, that literally saved my life, and that had always supported my artistry. That's the thing. You know, it always supported me. But she, you know, they were also like a very no bullshit person, which I appreciate because I'm like that too. But it was like, it could have been anyone else in the world. You know what I mean? And I would have been like, okay, well, that's your opinion. You're entitled to your opinion. But because I was so vulnerable with this person, it got to me. And it really, and I know that I messed up and I gave this person too much power, but it broke me. It really messed me up.
Sometimes there's this expectation of people that are close to us, and, you know, if they're a friend, you would want them to just, you know, maybe just validate you. Just a simple validation would have been okay. And maybe receive that.
For me, it was devastating. And then I had to step back, and years later I got to the point, I'm like, you know what? They're entitled, they are entitled to, I mean, I can't force someone to feel something that they don't. You know what I mean? They're allowed to have their opinion. There's a lot of artists that are on the radio and famous, and I don't like their music. I don't get it. I don't see it. And that's what she was saying to me, is like, I don't get it, Megan. I don't see it. And I finally came to peace with, you know what? That's okay that they don't get it. Yeah. That's okay that doesn't connect with them. And if my art doesn't speak to you, thank you, because that's a process of elimination. Thank you, because you're not who I want on my team.
Absolutely.
If you don't see my vision.
Right.
You know? And so I've been able to come to peace with that.
I want to thank you so much for coming in and sharing your time, your experiences with us. You've taught us a plethora of things. You've told us about, we talked about narcissistic abuse. We've talked about your wonderful artistry. We've touched on the random things regarding relationships, how you feel, and addiction. And I think it's been very worth it. And I want to say that as a friend of yours for many years, I'm so proud of you. Over a decade we've known each other, and I just think that I'm so happy to see you blossom and grow from the person that you were to this beautiful mother, artist, inspirational woman that I see today.
Thanks, Ericka. Thank you.
Sisters for life.
So everyone, keep their eyes open for my music videos for Could I Be, and my new single January, coming out sometime this summer, as well as my book Unrequited, my poetry collective, which will be available on Amazon in 2025. Both my music videos will be viewable on YouTube. Make sure you follow me on Instagram and give my music a watch and a share. Thanks.